With the help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Lamed Aleph, making the Siyum Amesechtes Taanis. We are dedicating this Daf and the Siyum Le'ilui Nishmas Miriam Bas Yibadal L'chaim Tovim Mordechay Moshe Aaron, who Shloishim is today. We're going to begin where we left off on Daf Lamed Amid Beis. We are 6 lines from the top of the Amid. We are learning firstly about whether working on Tisha B'Av is permitted or not, and the Gemara tells us that it's tolui b'minag. We're going to be speaking about the importance and the reward for those who mourn for Yerushalayim, that they will be seeing, or they see its simchasa, they will see its rejoicement. We're going to go back to the machlokes we had in the Mishnah and Daf Chavav, already Amud Beis, between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim concerning Kfiyas Hamita. Kfiyas Hamita, overturning the beds, was a minhag that was done by every mourner. Rabbi Yehuda says that on Tisha B'Av, like a mourner, one has to overturn one's beds. The Chachamim say that one does not need to do Kfiyas Hamita. And we're going to have actually 2 ways of understanding the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. We're going to focus on the end of the Mishnah, Lo Yehoyu Yomim Tovim LeYisrael K'chamisha Asar Ba'av Uchi Yom HaKippurim, and the Gemara is going to give us no less than 6 reasons why is Chamisha Asar Ba'av a day of festivity. Yom Kippur is self-understood, as the Gemara is going to say. And finally, we're going to be, the way the Rebbe understands the Siyum of the Masechta, we're going to be addressing the root cause of Galus, which brought about the fast of Tisha B'Av, which is the lack of Avos Yisrael, and therefore the Siyum is going to speak about how we rectify the cause, which will bring about the Geula, and much, much more. So let us start on Daf Lamed Amid Beis, 6 lines from the top of the Amid, after we quoted the Rab Shimon ben Gamliel's Shita, that a person should always undertake the behavior of a Talmud Chacham, even if one does not consider oneself to be a Talmud Chacham, meaning that a Talmud Chacham, even b'makom, right, that most people work on Tisha B'Av, they do not, it's advisable, everyone should behave like a Talmud Chacham, and this is not so pashut. We had this machlokes of Daf Yud Amid Beis regarding other topics, and Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, like we said, Lishitasei, holds that by inyanim of Tsa'ar, there is no mechse kiyura, there's no downside in one upgrading one's behavior, even if you're not yet on that level. And this is the inyan of Tsar, the inyan of not working on Tisha B'Av. We also spoke out that according to the Marsha, the reason why one should not work on Tisha B'Av is not that much related to Tsar, it's also about Tsar. But more importantly, it's about one focusing on the Avelus. And one should not distract oneself regarding the mourning, regarding the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. Tanya nami hachi, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel oimer, lo oilam yasa odam atzmei ketalmud chacham, a person, even if they're not be'emes yet on the level of the Talmud Chacham, but they should behave on the level of the Talmud Chacham. And again, here you have his words, Kedei sheyis'ana, in order for one to afflict oneself. When you stay focused on the mourning, then you feel a greater amount of affliction. And regarding afflicting oneself, there is never a problem with behaving like someone, even though you're not yet on that level. Tanya Idich, we learned in another Braisa. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel oimer, kol ha'oichel v'shoyse b'tisha b'av, ke'ilu oichel v'shoyse b'yoyim ha'kippurim. Even though this is biblical, and not only is Tisha B'Av only rabbinical, but when Bizman Bayesheni, we spoke about, there were certain shitas that held that at least at certain times during Zman Bayesheni they fasted on Tisha B'Av, but it was nullified. When we rebuilt the second Beis HaMikdash during the times of Shimon HaTzadik, during the times of the Chashmonoim, when we were independent, so you would say Tisha B'Av is not only a rabbinic fast, it was a rabbinic fast that went on, that went off, that went on, that went off. That's how important it is to fast on Tisha B'Av. And Abba Kiva Oimer, Kol ha'oisa melacha b'tisha b'av eina roya simin bracha la'olam. You know that the Rebbe has a very unique way of understanding the word la'olam. The pshat is that you'll never see a bracha. The problem with the pshat is that some people work on Tisha B'av and they see a bracha. It's not the metzias. So the Rebbe teaches the word la'olam means that it won't be durable. And as we all know, you can be matzliach, you can make a lot of money, and God forbid, the money can go to a medical bill. The money can go to taxes that you really don't owe.
What's the source of this?
No, just the way that Rebbe teaches.
The source of this comment that if one works.
Rabbi Akiva,
Rabbi Akiva says lo'olam, but you have to know how to interpret the word lo'olam. Lo'olam means that the bracha won't be durable, it won't last lo'olam. Now, v'chachamim oimrim, kol ha'oisim alacha b'tes ba'av, ve'eina masabal al Yerushalayim, the result will be that eina roya b'simchasa. He won't witness her joy. We're speaking about the joy that will happen at the time of the redemption. Notice, he can witness the redemption, but he won't experience the joy. And Shenemar, as it says, a pasuk in Yeshaya, that Simchu es Yerushalayim, v'gilu ba kol oy havel, that make glad Yerushalayim, and rejoice with all those who love her. And Sisu oisa masais, you know who will have that? Who is going to be elated? Kol hamasablim aleha, those who mourn for her. Nikanamru, that kol hamasabel al Yerushalayim, zoiche v'roya b'simchasa, will merit and see her joy. Now you have the famous insight that it doesn't say zoiche v'yira b'simchasa. It doesn't say it in the future tense. It says whoever mourns sees the joy in the present tense. And the pshat of that is, as we just read concerning the story of Mechiras Yosef, that Yaakov Avinu vayinochem, that Yaakov Avinu refused to be consoled. Why did he refuse to be consoled? So Rashi says that God made a gzeira that if someone loses a family member, people forget about the pain. The pain doesn't go away, but it gets minimized. If not, people won't be able to live. But that gzeira was only for someone who actually passed away. Yosef HaTzadik didn't pass away. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu, the same acute pain that one feels, God forbid, right after a passing, he felt for all those 22 years. In other words, he was unable to console himself. So if something is still alive for you, you won't be consoled. Only when something really dies, then you move on. So if someone is mourning for Yerushalayim, why are they mourning for Yerushalayim? The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed almost 2,000 years ago because it's still alive for them. So you see in the morning, you already see the simcha. You see how for a Yid, it's not something of the past. It's something that has to happen right now. And there's a good story, they say, regarding a Napoleon Bonaparte, that when he saw Yidden mourning, and he wanted to know, why are we fasting? Why are we mourning about the Churban Habayis? Which Churban Habayis? He told him it happened many, many years ago, 1,700 years ago, 1,600 years ago. He said, such people that are mourning after all these years for the Beis HaMikdash, they will see it being rebuilt. That's the Beroya. He saw the joy in the morning. But if a person doesn't mourn for Yerushalayim, is Eina Roya b'simchasa. And Tanya Namihachi, that kol ha'oichel basar, now I want you to know that here, L'choira, the Braisa is not speaking about someone who's breaking the fast. Here we're speaking about someone who's eating meat and drinking wine, L'choira in the Su'udas HaMafsekes. In other words, they're not fully mourning. So all of HaKosav Oimer, for them the pasuk says that Vatehi Avoinosam, that their sin will be al atzmoisam, that it will be on their bones. The Ritva says the meaning of it being on their bones is that their bones won't get up for Tchias HaMesim, or there'll be some sort of blemish on their bones when they get up for Tchias HaMesim. Just to read the one final Marsha on this Masechta, who says something great. He speaks about the Gemara in Nida, that I'm reading inside the Chiddush HaGadas over here. That the pasuk that their sin is on their bones is emphasizing that gam kisheyichla habasar hanirkav la'achar misa, when a person passes away, unless the person is a tzaddik, their body decomposes. So when a person eats meat, so it's marbe your own meat. That's sinful meat. But after the body decomposes, but va'adayin ho'atzama is kayamim, the bones remain. And therefore, so we learned in Nida that wine, when we drink wine right now, it affects the bones. So that's the pshat. The Marsha says that vatihi avoinoisam al atzmoisam. So if a person eats, God forbid, not kosher, or here it's not kosher at that time, they're eating basar on Tzuras HaMafsekes. So you can argue that sin won't endure forever. It doesn't, because when the body decomposes, the sin decomposes. That's the first 11 months, and the person undergoes what they undergo, but the sin is forgiven. But wine specifically affects the bones, and the bones remain. So there's a reishim of that sin that remains forever on that person. Well, this halacha l'maisa, we go way beyond it. We don't eat meat and drink wine. We Ashkenazim from Rosh Chodesh.
Didn't we learn some opinions that you could eat meat and drink wine?
No, that's what I was just told of it. That in our Mishnah, before how it evolved, the only time we stopped eating the meat and drinking wine was up until the Sudas HaMafsekes. It was in the Gemara. In that time, people ate meat. They only abstained from that by Sudas HaMafsekes. Amazing. And not only that, then we learned the Tanoim that held you can even drink wine. Just make a shinui. Just make a shinui. Okay. This Braisa is speaking about Sudas HaMafsekes. Or actually, the pshat of the Braisa is if you're eating meat and drinking wine on Tisha B'Av. 1 second. That's not the pshat. So it goes the way our Mishnah holds, that you only have to abstain from Sudas HaMafsekes. Yeah.
The way Chabad keeps Tisha B'Av versus the other Ashkenazi.
We all keep it the same.
Well, no, I'm talking about the level of mourning. Some people go very crazy versus.
Well. I mean, what are
the Rebbe's?
We being that we believe, like everyone really believes, that Mashiach is about to come. So there comes a point. Think about a personal thing. A person lost a family member, and they know that Tchias HaMesim is about to happen. So it's natural that when Tchias HaMesim is far away, so there's like just the pain of the loss. When Tchias HaMesim is about to happen, you start getting excited and anxious and nervous that our parents are going to take back all the Yerush. It's all going back to them. So I'm saying it's a different mindset. So you mourn for something else. Like, all right, it's going to be Freilach. Rabbi Yehuda Machai, but don't forget that your father that's taking it back, his father will take it back from him. So it's going to be a whole simcha. Rabbi Yehuda Machai v'kfiyas hamita. Kfiyas hamita is something that we will learn about in Moed Katan. Kfiyas hamita is something that we don't practice today. But when a person was in a state of mourning, they would turn over the beds in their homes. So Rabbi Yehuda is mechayev that on Tisha B'Av, like a mourner, turn over the beds. However, now we're going to see that the way we understand the machlokes, which is correct, there'll be another understanding of the machlokes in a brais. So let's begin. Tanya, we learned Amru loy li Rabbi Yehuda. How can you say that you're chayv in kfiyas hamita lidvarecha ubarais, women who are pregnant, umenikais, women who are halachically nursing their children, they need to sleep on a bed. Them sleeping on the ground won't work for them. It doesn't make sense. It's not mistabed that they should sleep on the ground. Now it sounds like, again, we're not familiar with this whole kfiyas hamita by mourners, but even if a person is an avelus, there were hetadim, there were dispensations for ubaris and menikos, because they can't.
So what's the question?
The question is, matehei aleim, are you saying that they should also turn kfiyas hamita? Because in the Mishnah you didn't specify, are there any exceptions? That's the question. Are there exceptions for women or mistama for cholim? I mean, for people that can't sleep on the floor. So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Yehuda clarified. No, I didn't say it just that everyone has to sleep on the ground. Afani lo yamarti ella biyachal. People who are able to sleep on the ground, they are commended to sleep on the ground. People are unable, they can sleep on their beds. Now the challenge will be, is that there's a braisa that says that the Chachamim also agree to that. So Tanya Nami Hachi, Moide Rabbi Yehuda lachachamim, that b'she'ena yachal, that people, the example is pregnant women, nursing women, that if they are unable to sleep on the ground, that they don't have to turn over the beds. And here, umoidem chachamim l'Rabbi Yehuda, that if someone is able to sleep on the ground, that they should sleep on the ground, meaning then they should turn over the beds. That's the minig that some people have, that they don't sleep with a pillow. It comes from this. The problem is, according to this Beraisa, they're not arguing. Like, what's even the argument? Everyone agrees, if you're able to sleep on the ground, turn over your bed. If you're unable to sleep on the ground, don't turn over your bed. But everyone holds there is a machlokes. So what my benayu, according to the version of the Braisa, of the machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim, ike benayu she'ar mitais. What about beds that are not being used? Now when a person is mourning, this concept of kfiyas hamita is not only your bed. All the beds in the house have to be turned over. That's the machlokes. No, the beds that are being used, according to the Braisa, everyone agrees. If you're able to sleep on the ground, it's better to turn over your bed. If you're not able to sleep on the ground, don't turn over your bed. What about the other beds that Rabbi Yehuda holds? Turn over all the beds in the house. And the Chachamim say that not. That is how the Braisa has the version of their machlokes. Kedatanya, that Kesha Amru Lichpois Hamitam Loi Mitasei Bilvad Hu Koifa. Elo Kol Hamitois Kulum Hu Koifa. This is Rabbi Yehuda. And the Chachamim argue with that. Okay, now again, we're not turning over our beds. We'll read a Tosfos in a moment. So Amar Rava says Rava that Hilchas Ketana Didan. Hilchas Ketana Didan doesn't means he's not paskening the halacha. This Hilchas means that our Mishnah's version of the machlokes is not the way we quoted it. Our Mishnah doesn't say that they all agree that b'yachol, sleep on the ground, turn over your bed. B'she'ena yachol, and they only argue on the other beds. Our Mishnah didn't write it. The words of our Mishnah is v'lo yhoid loik chachamim kol ikir. These are the words of the Mishnah. The words kol ikir doesn't mean that they agree in any way with Rabbi Yehuda. They completely disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. What Rava's pointing out is that our Mishnah doesn't have that version of the machlokes. Our Mishnah understands it's a black and white machlokes. The Chachamim hold never turn over a bed, even biyachol. Even biyachol. Now Rabbi Yehuda holds turn over the beds, maybe with exceptions. Look inside the Tosfos. Amar Rava Hilchas Ketana Didan. The second Tosfos. V'lo yhoid lo Chachamim perush she'ein tzarich lichpais hamita ever. Hilchasa doesn't mean Rava's paskening. He's just clarifying that we accept the version of our Mishnah regarding the machlokes. And then he writes, V'ha'idna, the chashin and lichshafim. Chashin and lichshafim means is that goyim, at times in the mid-ages, during the times of the Bali Tosfos, they accused people of practicing witchcraft and they would kill them. Kipshute, they would burn people because they were practicing witchcraft. When they saw Jews turning over the beds, they decided we're practicing witchcraft. And because of that, we no longer turn over our beds, even people who are in mourning. Not to be burnt. Not to be accused of witchcraft. So forget about the fact that on Tisha B'Av there's a machlokes tanoim whether you should mourn like an oval. Even people that are in mourning, Tosfos makes it clear, because he probably suffered through these things. That will happen in their time, that we don't turn over the beds at all. It's interesting that when the goyim make a religious decree against the Jewish people, sometimes we have to give up our lives. Afilo al arkasa de mesana. But the goyim didn't make a decree. That was a word. I asked this of Rab Chaim Vosner of blessed memory when he was Menachem Avel, when I was sitting Shiva for my father in the Holy Land, that why we should be Moiser Nefesh. I mean, when the Goyim make a religious decree, they're saying that you as a Jew cannot do something. Sometimes we can't give into it. The Goyim never made a decree. It's different. Just that the Goyim, the masses, the peasants, they were accusing us of witchcraft. So the Chachamim at that time said, you know what? Forget about this Kfiyas Hamita. Take off your pillow. Maybe sleep on the ground if you want. Don't turn over your bed. Don't do things which will give them a reason to go ahead and kill us. It wasn't reacting towards a religious decree. That's why it's less problematic for us to change a minig, and no one does Kfiyas Hamita anymore.
Do people do the pillow thing when they're in Avelis?
I never heard of that either, but that's what Kavan is saying, that maybe some people on Tisha B'Av do that. Some people in the world out there, there's different levels.
So, yeah, I understand.
I'm sure if they do it on Tisha B'Av, then they do it when they're in mourning. Okay. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, focusing on the ending of our Mishnah. Lo yehoyu yomim tovim li Yisrael. Look at the order. It's amazing that the Mishnah puts Tu B'Av before Yom HaKippurim. So Bishlam Yom HaKippurim, why is it such a festive day, the biggest Yom Tiv? Because the Izbei, number one, Slicho Mechila. There's forgiveness and there's pardon. Number one, that's every year. And number two, Yom Shenitnu B'Ay Luchos Achronos. I know it's connected, but it's like another reason. In the past, we got a tangible proof that God forgives us. This is something that repeats itself every year. Let me add something important, that Slicha Mechila and Yom Kippur doesn't only mean from God. Maybe that's the word, that we get it from God, that's a Luchas Achronos. Slicha Mechila is that that's before Yom Kippur, we apologize to each other. And therefore, there's a lot of promotion of peace that happens ad hayom hazeh, beautiful. Dafke before Yom Kippur. Every Jew tries to make amends before Yom Kippur with his fellow Jew. Okay, so that's why it's a day of tremendous rejoicement. Ella tu ba'av ma'hi, and we're going to have 6 reasons. They're not arguing with each other, but it's one compounded with the other. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, reason number 1. Yoim shehutru shvatim lavoi zeh bozeh. At the end of Chumash Bamidbar, which is at the end of Parshas Masei, when we spoke about the Bnei Tzolafchat, who were single women, who they inherited a chelek in Eretz Yisrael. And as the Torah writes clearly, that the heads of their tribe didn't want for them to marry out of their tribe, because the halacha is, as we'll learn a lot more in Bava Basra, in the laws of Yerusha, which is effective today, that when a woman gets married, both in the case where she predeceases her husband. The husband, he yarshins his wife. So if she's from the Shevet Menashe, and the husband is from Shevet Reuven, so the husband will inherit her land. And even if it's not about her predeceasing her husband or vice versa, the children that she has with her husband follow the tribe of her husband. It goes Mishpachas Beis Av. So she's Menashe, her children will be Reuven if she marries a Reuvenite, and if she doesn't have a husband, when she passes away, her children will be Yodesh from her. So her belongings will go to another Shevet. So Moshe Rabbeinu told them that they're not allowed to marry out of their tribe. Now that makes getting married that much more difficult. Think about the Shidduch crisis. I mean, we are never allowed, God forbid, to marry a non-Jewish person. Okay, but that's our limit. Once you tell a person that you can't marry out of your tribe, it's a bigger limit. So there's a challenge with Shidduchim. Now, what happened is that on Tu B'Av, the Chachamim darshaning the Psukim understood that what Moshe Rabbeinu said was only regarding the first generation of the people who entered Israel, including the Bnei Tzolafchat, but not only for Bnei Tzolafchat. But from a certain point onwards, people are allowed to marry from one tribe to the other, even though it means that there's going to be a transference of parts of Israel to another tribe. They didn't make that up. They darshaned a pasuk with the understanding that was only for the first generation. When did they make that drasha? It happened to be on Tu B'Av. And we celebrated that. So my darush, what did they darshan? When it says, again, this is a pasuk in Masay, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem lebnei tzolafchad. So Rashi writes that the word zeh, as a rule, zeh is a exclusionary word. Zeh, only this. What's only? Only means only in this doir. Only now, only as a one-time thing. But the next generation, there won't be such a restriction. Even if you have maidens who own property, you can marry out of your tribe. Davar zeh lo yenoig ela b'doir zeh. That's the meaning of zeh hadavar. That's reason number 1. Now, I want you to understand that slicha and mechila means fraternity amongst people. This is connected to the same thing. You know, it's closeness amongst people. Being able to marry isn't only about a shidduch crisis, but it brings tribes together. When you are zoicha and you marry your children well, there's a certain amount of friendship that you create with the family of your mechotanim. At least that's the goal, that's the ideal. So when you can marry into tribes, there was a certain getting closer between different shvatim. Amar Rab Yosef, Amar Rab Nachman, reason number 2, very similar, but at another point in history, Yoim Shehut Shevet Binyamin Lavi Bekol. So there was the tragic story of Pilegesh Begiva, and the reaction that we had aside of, we had a real civil war. And we killed out almost all of the male members of Shevet Binyamin. There were only 300 men left. Not only that, we made a decree that no one is allowed to marry into that Shevet. And also, that decree was only during that episode. So there was a woman that was not a full-fledged wife, but she was a Pelegish, which whatever that means. And she was taken by someone from the Shevet Binyamin, and she was raped, and she died. She was assaulted, and she died. And our reaction was mamish to wage war against the entire Shevet. And at the end, to decree no one can marry into Shevet Binyamin. And what happened is that on Tu B'Av, we decided at a time later that ban of marrying into Binyamin is lifted. Again, which means that now that the people, the members of Binyamin can marry all the other tribes. So it took away that animosity, and it also allowed for Shevet Binyamin to continue. If not, that would be the end of that tribe. I don't know how many years it was. I think all the people that were alive while she was raped.
It was a generation.
That was a generation. That's a long time. Okay. That Yoim Shut Hashem V'Yam Alavi B'Kol Shenemar in Shoftim V'ish Yisrael Nishba B'Mitzvah Lemor Ish. Every Jew swore. Every Jew swore at that time in the location of mitzvah. That what? That Ish Mimenu Layitan Bitel Binyamin Laisha. No one will allow their daughters to marry into the few remaining Benyamites, Benyaminites. And so that was an oath. But the Chachamim darshaned at a time later on Tu B'Av that no longer, the ban is lifted. Again, my darush, they didn't go against the oath. So Amarav, in the pasuk that we just quoted, it says Mimenu. Mimenu means from us, from the ones that are living, V'loi mi bibanenu. Gavaldik. Next. Now the next cause of celebration on Tu B'Av, here we have Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Here on the side you have that Rav Dimi Bar Yosef Amar Rav Nachman. What did they say? Yoim Shekolu Boy Meisei Midbar. It's interesting that we're not going on the chronological order of history, and there has to be a reason for that. Because L'chayra Yoim Shekolu Boy Meisei Midbar, I think it might have even happened, not might have, Mistama happened not before B'nai Selavchat. So what happened? So as we know that all the men that were in between 20 and 60 during the Chet HaMeraglim were condemned to pass away in the Midbar. Aside of the Meraglim themselves that passed away immediately, all the other people didn't pass away. They passed away only when they turned 60. But they didn't pass away on their birthday. If you turn 60, then on the next Tisha B'Av, they would pass away on Tisha B'Av. So once that happened, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they realized the Seder, that everyone who turned 60 would pass away in the next Tisha B'Av. All the men, only the men, but the men passed away. So they decided, just like it's an inyan today for people to buy a plot in the Beis HaChaim. It's a good thing to do that. Why? So when a person passes away, they don't trouble their family with additional headaches. Don't worry, there's going to be expenses that the people charge. Even if you own a plot, your family members are going to pay an arm and a leg still. But at least there is a plot, there is no machlokes where you should be buried. You do a favor to your family. So the same concept, they knew they're passing away. Why should they bother the family burying them? They buried themselves. They dug a grave and they went to sleep in the grave. And the last year, now there's a machlokes, according to most, the last year, people that were supposed to pass away, because they were already 20 during the Chet HaMeraglim, they dug the graves, they went to sleep in it on Tisha B'Av, and they wake up in the morning. So they decided if they went to sleep after 39 years, something repeating itself, this is the 40th year, they turned 60, it must have been that they made a mistake in the cheshbon of the calendar, which was common. Which was something possible, not common, it was possible. So they decided, must have been, it was Ches B'Av, and tomorrow is Tes B'Av. So they went to sleep again in the grave. And many of them, what do you think they did? They gambled all the money away before. In other words, they were ready to die. They were not ready to live. So they went to sleep again. Maybe they're going to die tomorrow. It looked like they were looking forward towards it. Tu B'Av, the moon is complete. That's it. It's not Tisha B'Av. So they realized that God forgave them. And the generation realized that that's it, that's the end. We're going into Eretz Yisrael. And on top of that, that's the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu vo'es Chanan 515 times for him to enter Israel. What's the 515? That if you make a cheshbon from Tez Zayin B'Av, or from Tez Vav B'Av, all of the tefillos, which includes 5 tefillos on Ne'ilah Yom Kippur, until Zayin Adar, you have exactly 515 tefillos. That's why he davened. It's from then until his passing, he davened, forgot to forgive him. Why did he begin davening then? Why not daven before? Because before he felt God made it the decree, God is not going back on his gezerah. He saw how God forgave the last batch. God went back on his oath. An oath in the negative is something that God can take back. Only a prediction of something good will never be taken back. So he felt God can take it back for him. Yeah.
All right, in this case, God punished the men. In the case of Benjamin, the women were punished too, because they could have married. And Yohanan addresses all these women, so why?
Because the guilt of allowing to have a society where someone can be raped to death is a guilt on everyone. There's something wrong with the chinuch.
It was 600.
It was, thank you, to make correct, only 600 men stayed. But you can say that's a sin of a society. And when it came to the Meraglim, the women did not cry. The women had emunah. They mamish did not participate, like in the Chet Egel, by the Chet, they did not participate in that sin. They didn't, they had emunah.
But one female was raped.
One female was raped, but like you have in the story of Shechem, that if the fact that this type of crime happens in a society and the society doesn't take measures to counter it, that is a societal sin. And also the fact that such a thing can happen, there's no doubt that it's connected to the way we were being educated at that time. Okay, weiter. So Yom Shkol Bay Meisim Midbar, the Amar Mar, actually Kol Meisim Midbar. Now there's another detail, that since people were dying in the desert, so there was a certain Marash Chayda that was happening during those almost 39 years, because we also just learned before that the Meraglim happened in the second year. We really didn't happen all the 40 years. It happened 38 in some years. But anyways, until that was dying, that the type of communication, nevuah, that Moshe Rabbeinu had in the beginning, and he had at the end, did not happen during those times. So we're pointing out that the union, there was a getting of together between Moshe and God. That's the emphasis. We're all going to emphasize a certain type of reapproachment. Shemar, as it says, 3 lines from the bottom. This is in the beginning of Chumash Devarim, that Vayihi Kasher Tamu, that it was after they ended. What ended? Kol Anshe Al Mocham Alamis. Then Vaidaber Hashem Elai. In other words, says Chazal, Elai Hoyadibur. Only then did God speak to me on the level of Vayadaber. And I want you to know that Vayomer means speaking gently, right? Vayadaber is speaking strongly, and when someone speaks to you gently, externally, it feels like there's a closeness. But we know that's not the case. If there's emes between people, like the Rebbe would smile at people who were not yet that close. They would get a smile. A chassid would very rarely get a smile. A chassid would get a frask, not from our Rebbe, but the way it works. And that's the way that when me and you are real chaverim, then you can speak to me strongly. If you have something to tell me, you tell me strongly. If you don't tell me, if you don't vayadaber me, that's because you don't consider me to be close to you. So you're walking on eggshells. Everything is sensitive. Everything is vayomer. So there was a separation. Everything was gentle. Now we're back to back. We're back to normal. What's back to normal for a yid? Now I can give it to you. I can vayadaber you. And it's connected because ein ruach hakodesh shoyre element toich simcha. So we were not in a state of simcha. There was this dark cloud over us. Once the dark cloud went away, we went back to a level of simcha. Now we're close, and now the level of vayadaber returned. Number 4, that Ula Amar. Ula says, Yoim shebitel Hosheya ben Elah, and we're going to have the word that we used before from the Aruch, Perois Da'ois, Shahoyshiv Yeravim ben Avat, Aladrachim, Shalayalu, Yisrael L'regel. So after King Solomon passed away, so in the times of Rechavam, right, Ben Shloima, there was then the split between Malchei Yehuda and Malchei Yisrael. The first Melech of the Yisrael over the 10 tribes came from Shevet Yosef. That's connected to the parsha of the week. So now, in the beginning of history, Yosef was the king. Under him was Yehuda. Vayigash El of Yehuda. Yehuda was battled to Yosef. During Zman Bayis Rishon, from this point, they were competing. Yosef, Yeravim ben Avat, and the Melech of Yehuda began with Rechavam. And when Mashiach will come, Va'avdi David Melech Aleim. So what happened over there? When Yeravim ben Avat broke off, and now it's 10 tribes against 2, he didn't want for the Yidden to go L'regel. Because the Yidden would see how only Malachim from Beis David can sit in the Azara. They're going to see that halachically, the king of Yehuda is more important. So to prevent that, ultimately, first of all, he built an Avodah Zarah in Beis El. He built an Avodah Zarah in Dan. Whether it was an Avodah Zarah, whether it was a Beis HaMikdash, and he was telling people, you want to get close to God, go over there. So there was one option in the south, there was one option in the north, so to say. And not only that, he put up sentries, not allowing Yidden to go to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, in the times of Hosheya ben Elah, even though Rashi writes on top of Lamed Aleph, he was a Rasha, but at least he allowed people to choose. Again, that's about getting close. So now we were able to go there. There was a greater amount of mingling that was permitted. V'amad, and he said, Aflamed Aleph le'eza she'yir tzeyalo. The Rashi on top of the Amid. That Hosheya ben Allah Rasha haya. Don't make him into a tzaddik. T'chsiv, vayas hara be'enei Hashem. Rak loy kemalchei Yisrael. He wasn't as wicked as his predecessors. V'hainu the kamar rak. That's the word rak. He was wicked, but he was mevatel. Here Rashi writes as prois do'ois. With a samach we had before in the Aruch with a zayin. V'amar le'eza she'irtzu yalem. Number 5, top line on the Lamed Aleph, that Rav Masna Amar yoim shenitnu harugei beita l'kvura. In year 135 to the Goyish Common Era, that means when we lost the revolt, when Bar Kokhba's revolt collapsed, and the Romans did a greater Churban as they did during Churban Abayis, which is why in Gittin, in the Sugya of the terrible Churban, the Gemara weaves, everything is woven together, the Churban Bayis Rishon, Churban Bayis Sheni, and Harugei Beitar. And what happened on Tu B'Av, that we were given the permission to bury all those hundreds of thousands of people. According to the Gemara, literally millions. Whether that's a guzma, we can bury them. Now, what's the story behind that? So you have different nuschos, whether we were used as a fence around certain Roman vineyards. They wanted to protect it from outside, so they used Jewish corpses to create a fence. Now, there's actually a version that says that we were there for 7 years. Other girsois, we were there for 7 months. And the miracle was, number 1 is that during that time we did not decay, and number 2 is that finally we were allowed to bury the dead, and you have to appreciate that this is a Golus Dika celebration, because that's called the celebration. The celebration would have been for Bar Kokhba to win the rebellion and for him to build the Beis HaMikdash. That's called winning. Here we lost, but still, for Golus, it's a celebration. For Amar Rav Masna, that Oise Yoim, that on the day which was Tu B'Av, Shenitnu Harugei Beita L'Kvura, at that time, Tiknu B'Yavne, they added in the benching of this big bracha. By the way, the big bracha didn't begin as big as it is right now, but it began with Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Hokei L'Avinu Malkeinu Adoreinu B'Oreinu, and it ended Umikol Tuv L'Olam Alei Chasreinu. That was the initial bracha of Hatoiv U'Meitiv, and Hatoiv U'Meitiv means that God who is good and God who confers good. Why this double expression, Hatoiv? We thank God, the goodness of God expressed itself, Shelo Yisrichu, that the bodies did not decay for the 7 months or maybe even 7 years. And Vahameitiv, that Shenitnu L'Kvura. And as Tosfos writes, Tab Tosfos, Tiknu B'Yavna Toiv U'Meitiv, Perish B'Brechas HaMazon, U'Mishum Hacha Tiknu Yoiser, Al Hayayin Hatoiv U'Meitiv Tvei B'Shar Devarim. We learned at the end of brachas and Perikoroya, right, that the bracha, just the words Hatoiv U'Meitiv, aside of it being said in benching, is commonly said by wine. When you have very good wine, you say Hatoiv U'Meitiv. Why? Lefi Shahoyu Kumoi Geder Bekerem. Because the bodies, it's also connected to here. It's not just the Hatoiv U'Meitiv and benching. The fact that the Jewish corpses were used as a fence around a kerem of that hegemon, of that wicked Roman, or of those Romans, so we want to link it to wine. That a miracle happened in the vineyard. What was the miracle? That their bodies did not decompose. Okay, back over here. Rabbi Yosef the Amri Tarvayu, the 6th and the final historical event that happened on Tu B'Av, which is yet another reason to make it into the greatest holiday, that Yoim Shapasku Milichreis Eitzim Lamaracha, that we every year can only cut wood that's very dry to be used on the altar, and being that the season changes from it being very hot, beginning to go into winter, so therefore we no longer cut wood. So amazing. So you're making a celebration because you're not cutting wood. And here comes the obvious question. Cutting wood for the maracha is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. So you're celebrating because you're not doing a mitzvah. Mikan, celebrate when you are Messiahim. It's not because you ended and now you have no more in the future. That's a reason not to rejoice. The opposite. Whenever you're Messiahim, a mitzvah, including a Siyum on a Masechta, when you make a celebration, that's connected to here. They looked at it, now we finally completed the mitzvah. And indeed, Tanya, or Dit Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer, Agadol Omer, that Mechamisha Asr Ba'ave Elach, since from the 15th of Av onwards, Tashash Koicha Shel Chama, the power of the sun, of the summer, is weakened. And I want you to know, we are familiar with this. We learned about the seasons. We learned about the seasons in Rosh Hashanah. The seasons have nothing to do with the lunar date. This has to be understood. The seasons have to do with the sun. And the solar calendar and the lunar calendar are not aligned. We correct it by adding another month. So this is a miraculous thing. This is a miraculous thing that Hashem made it that for Eden, and therefore for the whole world, that the weakness of the sun is connected to the lunar date. That in itself is Apsanes. And Taka, from the 15th of Av, the sun gets weakened, independent of where are you in the season. Appreciate that. And therefore they stopped cutting wood for the maracha. Not only that, they called the 15th of Av the day Yom Tvar Magol, the day that they broke the axe. And it's the axe that cut down the wood. They broke that axe. Now, what does that mean, the day that they broke that axe? The Rebbe has a Gavaldike insight. There's a din that metal may not touch the stones of the Mizbeach. B'chlal, you don't bring metal instruments on Harabayis. But all of the stones that were built into the Beis HaMikdash, they were allowed to be chiseled and cut and rectified with metal utensils, as long as you did it outside Harabayis. Then you would schlep the ready-made stones. However, the stones of the Mizbeach, if metal only touches the stone, it invalidates that stone. And why is that? Because the Mizbeach was created to lengthen the life of man, to be marach yamam shaladim. Barzel was created by God primarily to shorten life of man. So it's a non-match. So that's the word that Rebbe says, Yom Tvar Mago, the Pnimius, that an axe shortens the life of man. Ki adam eitz hasoda. And now that we are speaking about the concept, as we'll point out in a moment, that really all this is connected to Avos Yisrael, because everything we learned brought closeness between people, and even the concept of Shenitnu Haruge Beitar Lekvura. You have to understand that when they made a revolt, and we lost the revolt, so there was a certain amount of animosity between some people against those who organized the revolt. Because once you lose, look at the churban that it brought upon us. The Romans were bad. They became much worse. And as long as we saw the Haruge Beitar laying out there in the fields, this caused a rift between the Jewish community. And every single thing here is about an approximation, a slicha mechila bin adam lachaveroi, an avos Yisrael between people. And that's the meaning of Tvar Magol. Like they say, shtech nicht. No, it's a magol, it hurts, cuts. We broke the instrument that cuts. We broke the metal. No more metal. No more metal, because Avos Yisrael brings about the redemption, and the opposite of that brought about death. That's the Tvar Magol. And Mikan ve'elach, and now there's another Nakuda, which is also connected. From the day of 15th of Av and on, since Taka, there is a change of the season, which means that the days are starting to get shorter, which means the nights are getting longer, so people work during the day. And especially in those days, there was no electricity. You work during the day. So what did you do at night? At night you learn Torah. So during the summer, there was longer day hours, you worked longer. So last night, you came home, you daven ma'ariv, you went to sleep. Once the days got shorter, which means the lights got longer, mikan ve'elach de moisif, Yosef. Those who use the additional time at night to be moisif in the limud HaTorah, God gives them longer life. Again, Tvar Magol. Magol is Mekatzer Yomov. There is Avos Yisrael, and then there's learning Torah. They both bring about Arichos Yomim. And here it's very strong words. Udeloi Moisev, if a person doesn't use the extra time at night to add on the Limud HaTorah, so here you have the words Yei Asef. They're gathered in, they pass away before their time. And Tana Rav Yosef, my Yei Asef, not gathered in a little bit earlier. Amar Rav Yosef Tikbere Imei. That God forbid, if a person who has an opportunity to learn and they don't seize that opportunity, that they can predecease their mother. Why the mother? Why not the father? So they say that al titoish toira simecha, there's the father and the mother. The father is the scripture, and toira simecha is toira shabal peh. And the daytime is the time to learn Tanach. That's the model of Pikabol. And toira shabal peh, toira simecha is started to be learned at night, because learning Tanach is relatively easier, and learning Torah Shabbat Peh is very difficult to learn the Mishnah, to learn the Gemara, and at night you have a menuchas hanefesh because you're not being distracted. There's calm, there's quiet. The Rambam writes that the Reiv Chachma of a person is learned at night. Now there are exceptions to that, but that's the way normally it works. It's amazing how much distractions we have. There's too many other options. When there's no other option, it became normal that people mamish learned during the night. So the night, which is dedicated for Torah Simecha, for Torah Shabbat Peh, if a person is not seizing with that, so that's the Vartik B'Reimei. And then the Mishnah said that during the day Shebehen is plural. I want you to know, it's during Yom Kippur and during Tu B'Av. What happened then, also connected to Avos Yisrael, about connecting between one Jew and the other. The greatest Avos Yisrael is marriage. Pashat, that's what happens. Two strangers get married. That's the ultimate act of Avos Yisrael. So, and we promoted marriage. And it was during these days that B'nai Yisrael, and the Gemara is going to elaborate more details to that which is Merumez in the Mishnah. Tana Rabbanan. That first of all, when it says that they all borrowed the white garments from each other, if I worded it, I want to make a correction. It's not for everyone to have the same garment. There's no such a thing. They wanted to take away the shame on people to borrow garments from the other. But still, there were more chashuva garments and there were less chashuva garments. There's always going to be classes. Tana Rabbanan, Bas Melech.
Between the white, you're saying?
Between the white, the daughter, Bas Melech, she would not wear her own white garments that she owned. She would borrow her begadim from the Bas Kohen Gadol. The Bas Kohen Gadol is down a notch. But the garments of the Kohen Gadol was definitely more chashuv than the white garments of the commoner. But there's many levels. The Bas Kohen Gadol would borrow her garments from the Bas Gan. We learned Skan Kohen Gadol in the beginning of Yuma. The Bas Gan would borrow it me Bas Meshuach Molchama, the kind that's designated to inspire the troops before we go to war. Bas Meshuach Molchama would borrow it me Bas Kohen Hedyot. And since the aristocratic class of the Jewish people were borrowing garments one from the other, so no one was ashamed to borrow garments. That was the goal. The goal is they went down one level. I want to point out that it's not that everyone wore the same garment. Even here, there were differences. Their garments were nicer. The point is, it was to take away the busha of borrowing.
Last time we learned that they all wore linen.
They all wore linen, and if I said they all wore the same linen, I want to correct that. You see clear, they didn't wear all the same, but there was commonality. They all wore white, they all wore linen, they all borrowed. V'chol Yisrael shoyalim zeh mizeh. Why? Kedei shelo yizbayish es mi she'ein lo. That was the goal. So everyone borrowed garments. And then the Mishnah...
Should it not say mi she'ein la?
Very good point. So Yaakov is saying, why does it say in the masculine? Maybe the answer is because the fathers did the borrowing. Maybe the father went to the neighbor who owed him money.
What was the question?
Law, you should say law.
Law. Talking about the women. Oh.
So maybe
it's the men that get embarrassed. It's the fathers that get embarrassed if their daughters don't have.
I would say that the women were so embarrassed that they didn't want to borrow. Faket. It says that by Yerusha, right? That before you divide the Yerusha, the mezoinus is given to the daughters before the Yerusha. Why? Because they have busha to have a certain amount of shame. Maybe. Very good. Oh, kol ha'kelim tu'ulam tefilla. Now, once you borrow garments, if you have one Jew that's not careful in Tuma of Nida, their garments are not pure. So even though that, that Kohen would never have in his house begadim that were not first toiveled. But you don't do that. Everyone has to table the garments. Amar Rabbi Elazar, afilu mikupalim umanacham bekufsi. Even if they are folded and they are in a drawer. And normally, people would fold the garments in a drawer. Today, you would fold the garment after you cleaned it. Then it was on top of after you taking it to the mikveh. That was the common practice. It would be rare for people to have begadim that are imbued with tumas nida. Yet, since there might be one that has that, again, not to a shame, your begadim have to be toivel. The other person's begadim are good already. Let me borrow it from Reuven and not from Shimon. Everyone needed to toivel their garments. So what happened was you would lend your garment, and the first thing the recipient would do, they would take it to the mikveh. But Kalim means clothing. B'nois Yisrael yoitzois, and now these girls would go out. V'choilois means they would dance in a circle in the vineyards. Tana, we learned in a Braisa, Misha ein lo isha nifna l'sham, that their dance wasn't segregated. That they danced in a place that all of the men that needed to find a wife, they would go to the vineyard.
They would watch them dance?
They would watch them dance. And they were dancing, and I just want to make it clear that choilois is the way, you want to use the word dance. Dancing is called rekida. There was no rekida. There was making a circle. Making a circle is the way we Hasidim dance in a circle, if you want to call that dancing. I don't call that dancing, but we call that, the Gemara calls that dancing. There's no lack of modesty. Just people walking in a circle is nothing. But there's a mystical meaning of that dance.
So I can choose.
Oh, so 1 second. So now, what happened was, if you look back in the Mishnah is very brief. I'm going to go back and forth. And the Gemara is going to touch in every line in the Mishnah. It says like this, that they would say, I'm reading in the Mishnah now, Chavav and Beis, Bachar sana inecha. Bachar, lift up your eyes. Or the A, and take a look. Ma'ata b'aydelach. What are you choosing for yourself? And it would continue. Al titin enecha b'noi. Don't focus on beauty, focus on mishpach, on yichus. And then they said, Sheker echein v'hevel hayofi. It sounds like one statement. Says the Braisa that phrase is 3 phrases said by different groups of women. There are women that were beautiful, there were women that had yichus, there were women that had neither. Well, we have to just unpackage it. Yeah, we learned it in the Mishnah, but it's unpackaged there. So says, Miyuchasa shebehem hoyo oimres bachur. So Tana Rabbanan, it's really 3 groups. That yaf yeshebehem, the beautiful single woman, me hoyu oimrois, they would say, not what it says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is always very bekitzer. Tenu einechem liyofi. Look at our beauty. She'eni she'elo liyofi. The primary reason for a wife is beauty. And they were the ones that said, Bachur sana einecho re'ei mata b'ayderlach. Yechap, that line was said by the beautiful woman. Open up, you look at us. Now, the next statement, Al titin enecho b'noi, was said by another group of women. But they were miyuchases. Miyuchases shebehem mehoyo oimrois tenu einechem lemishpacha. Look at our yichas. Lefi she'ein isha el lebanim. Beauty is temporary. Yichus, that's going to go forever into the family. And then, and they were the ones that said, Al titein enecha b'noi tenecha b'mishpach. Chevra sheker echein v'hevel hayofi was said by a third group. And the word chein here would mean yichus. That's not double. Sheker echein, because mishpachas chein is taka miyuchas. So when you want to say that if they don't have yichus, sheker echein, that's a yichus. Michoari shebehem mehoyo oimrois. Get married l'shem shamayim. But you have to, after you marry us, you have to adorn us with gold. Because really, all Jewish women are beautiful. Let's go back to the first statement. It's only anius and golus that makes them appear not beautiful. That's the emes. In other words, women are beautiful. Eloma, Galus, Anius. So you don't find us beautiful, that's because we're poor. Marry us and make us beautiful. Amar Ula Bira, Amar Abulazar. So now that we are concluding to learn about this shidduch promotion that happened on Tu B'Av, because all of the 6 events are connected to historic events where there was a proximity. Now, in Mesei Midbar, the proximity was between God and Moshe Rabbeinu. They got closer. So whether it is Ben Adam LaMakayim, whether it is Ben Adam LaChaveirei, mamish like Yom Kippur. The way we learned, there are 2 steps. There's Ben Adam LaMakayim on Yom Kippur, that God gave us the Luchas Achraynis, but there's the Ben Adam LaChaveirei, the Slicha Mechila, that we apologize and ask for forgiveness from each other. So now we're going to learn about the Asid coming together, the ultimate coming together between God and the Jewish people, and between the Jewish people with each other, which will happen in the future. That Amar Abulazar Asid, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lasois Machoil. Let's tzaddikim. God is going to put the tzaddikim into a circular dance, and God is going to be right in the center. V'hu yoshev b'neim began Eden. And v'cholechad ve'echad mara be'etzboi, and everyone will see the gilui of godliness to the point that they can point with their fingers. Shenemar, as it says, and this pasuk we say not only during Simchas Torah by Hakafis, but we say this by Vayitin Lacha v'Amar by Yom Hahu, that we will say, Hine Elokeinu Zeh Kivinu Loi. Zeh is only said when you can point with your finger. And V'yoshienu Zeh Hashem Kivinu Loi. I'll read the final words when I'll make the siyum here in the shul or at some point in the near future. But I want to share a vart that the Rebbe says that in this pasuk it says Zeh twice. Why does it say Zeh twice? And what's the meaning of the circle? So you have so many beautiful classic interpretations that when you make a circle, everyone is equal. Everyone is different, but everyone is equal. You are you, I'm an I, but we're in a circle. Everyone is equally close to the one in the center. There isn't a point in the circle that's farther from the center. In other words, part of the getting together that's going to happen with Mashiach is that we're going to remain with different tribes. There'll be different paths, but every yid, every group will appreciate that the other group is also connected to God. I'm not closer to God than you're closer to God. But the Rebbe says like this, amongst the various Siyum that he made, that what's the Zeh twice? The first Zeh goes to Shem Elokeinu. The other Zeh goes to Zeh Havaya. And the Rebbe gave a good example. He says that when Mashiach will come, don't think that it's going to culminate, it's going to end. There's no end. There's Machayel al Choyel. There's always growing. There's going to be a tremendous amount of growth that will begin when Mashiach will come. And the example the Rebbe gave was, is you have a child going to Cheder. And what did he learn in Cheder? Bereshis bara Elokim. So the father asks the child, no, what does it mean, Bereshis bara Elokim? He teaches that in the beginning, when God was creating heaven and earth, Chumash Rashi. Then he gets older, and he learns that Bereshis, the Chazal say, no, Bereshis means Beis Reshis. Bishvil, that why did God create? It's not only recording what God did, or when God did it, why? That God created the world, Bishvil Yisrael or Bishvil HaTorah. That both are called Reshis. Then he gets even older, and he begins to learn Pnimiyas HaTorah. And he teaches Bereshis is Barashis, that the world is created is an expression of God's 6 midos. So what does a child realize? He realizes that even though he learned, but there's a deeper level, and there's a deeper level. And in the beginning, when we see godliness, Zeh Elokeinu, you look at nature, Elokim, Teva, and you notice that nature is God, which is beautiful. That's the easiest, because it's the closest to us. Wow, look at God. I feel God in nature. That's one level. Then you reach a higher level, and you begin to see that which is beyond nature, to the point that you can point your finger. But it doesn't end over there. No, that's also the concept of a circle, that a circle is, there's no end. That our Ladas es Hashem, don't think it's going to be boring, it's going to be exciting. That we're going to grow, and every time you go around the circle, you're getting somewhere. It's not you're going back there, it's a spiral. That when Mashiach will come, we will continuously grow. But the Nakuda is what will bring about the coming of Mashiach, the Avos Yisrael. And that's the whole concept of Taanis, that Taanis connected to Tisha B'Av is because of Sinas Chinam. And the more we figure out how to dance in the circle, then that's going to build the Beis HaMikdash. And then we're going to be connected to God. And then we'll go Machayel al Choyel. We're going to all grow from Zeh Elokeinu to say Zeh Havaya. And there's ad infinitum. This will be forever and ever. That will be a continuously growth. Dafka, because we will be united with each other. Chavra Mazel Tov for the Siyum. And God willing, tomorrow we are beginning Masechtas Megillah.